Hello everyone, my name is Ephraim Katsir, and on behalf of Sephardic Heritage International DC, or SHIN-DC, we welcome you to our Maqam of the Week webinar series with Syrian Jewish vocalist, Buddhist, and teacher Asher Shasho-Levy, who will now begin class number 2, Maqam Sigah.
Yes, exists in a maqam family. It's a maqam that stands on its own. So last time I introduced some of the concepts of jins or ajnas, these little bits of scale fragments that form a maqam, and we talked about how these form the maqamat. So we're going to actually see today, I think, a little bit better how this works, because Saba is kind of a maqam that stands on its own, whereas Siga is, or Sika, as in the more standard Arabic parlance, this maqam is called, is really one of the major maqam families. And in the Syrian Jewish tradition, this maqam is extremely important because for the tefillah, for the reading of the Sefer Torah, and also for the daily tefillah, like if you're just doing a standard everyday chanting of the daily service, you're going to do it in Sigah. So if you want to understand how to do Sephardic prayer in the context of Syrian or Turkish or Egyptian or Levantine Sephardic context, you really have to understand this maqam. So let's take a look at what this maqam is made up of. So Ephraim, if you'll share the maqam sheet, the sayar of the maqam, so we can all take a look at it. So the interesting thing about this maqam, and I think we'll all notice very quickly how different this is from a Western scale when we take a look at it, is that this maqam the name is very illustrative of what is going on here. So the word, I believe it comes from, the original term is Sigah in Persian, which means third. So if we look at the second page, Ephraim, of this packet, I believe it is. If you can go to that, we'll see the scale. It is based on what is the third degree of what is thought of as the Arabic major scale or Turkish major scale, which is Rast, which is conceived of as always being on C, basically. It can be transposed, but it's always thought of as being on C. So if we start a Rast on C, the first note is going to be C, then you have the D, and then the third is Sega, or Siga in the Syrian Jewish parlance. Sika in general Arabic parlance is this half-flat third. Okay, so we're talking about the basic Arabic scale, the basic if you're thinking of the maqam that's in a way conceptually similar to a major scale, is Rast. So on C, the third degree is this note, this E half flat, and that note is Siga. And that is the root of today's maqam. So today's maqam you can think of it as almost sort of unstable. It has a root degree that is also sort of thought of as a third. So it's thought of in relation to Rast as well. So if you're conceiving of the base genes of Sika, it's going to be this E half flat, F, and G. It's that. So that's the basic Sika genes. And so if you're establishing Maqam Siga, you probably are going to start like this. You might go down even because you're in relation to that Ras. So. So that's the basic idea. It's that, and And also it's very important to note that E half flat is very regionally dependent. The tuning of that is extremely regionally dependent. So Arabic tuning is going to be in the middle of Turkish, which is sharper, and Persian, which is flatter. So in Turkish tuning, it's almost going to be like a major third, which allows for this little bit of ornamentation, which is very common that in the Turkish music. Where their Sigah tuning is going to be like almost like that, where the Arabic is going to be just a little bit flatter. Okay, moving up the maqam, you have let's see, you have the rast on G. Now it's important to note that this second part of the maqam is most often substituted with the reason I have huzam up on the top there. It's more often substituted with huzam, but we'll get to that because we want to get into the pure Sigah first. So it would be starting from the beginning. That would be a pure scale of straight Sigah. So just ornamented, a little bit of taqsim on that. Okay, so that's basically the sound of that. And then you'll see on the staff below, there's a variation for going down, which it has the Sika Nahawan. So here, it'll go up on the rast. And that's the Sika Nahawan on the descent. Okay, before I go on to the huzam variation, does anybody have any questions about this? No questions? Okay, let's go on to huzam then. Okay, so huzam, the truth is, especially in a Sephardic Jewish context, when you're talking about Sigah, outside of a Turkish context, in Turkish music there is a tendency to play this true Sigah. Okay, moving on to huzam. Huzam is the most common variant of Sigah, and in a general Sephardic, particularly Syrian, Jerusalem Sephardic, but the Egyptian is really where the huzam variant became most popular. It's overtaken true Sigah as being the most popular maqam in the Sigah family, both in terms of improvisation and also in terms of the actual songs. So, but as I mentioned, in terms of Turkish music, there is a tendency to play the true Sigah, the Sigah with the rast. Okay, so huzam, same as Sigah on the bottom. It's a jin Sigah. So E, F flat, F, G, but then Hijaz. And then rast up here. So that's huzam. So huzam, I would say, is more popular than the other Sigah, the standard Sigah, I would say, both in terms of songs, like our pizmon that we're going to do later, Yahid al-Dagul, though it is considered to be a Sigah pizmon in the Syrian Red Book, it's technically huzam. It technically has a huzam transposition. So I'll play a little huzam so you can get a feeling for it. that's huzam, as opposed to the regular Sigah, which would be like. Hear the difference? It's just, they're both maqamat that have the root note being something that is there is I was gonna say that a Sigah maqam is a maqam that has a genes of Sigah in the base, meaning that it has a half flat as its root. But there is a maqam that disproves that, called Sigah baladi, which has a G as its tonic, and then the next two notes have the same tuning and relation. But that's for another day. But basically, what you can think of it as, it is a maqam. A Sigah maqam is a maqam where the root note acts as a third also. So there really aren't many scales like that, I think, in Western music, where you have the root note is also a third. It's I don't really know any other way to explain it. So, and then you also have this C that you're sort of contrasting it with. And if you were to harmonize it, like in a contemporary setting, a lot of Sigah songs get harmonized, like with synths and things like that for popular arrangements. What you would do is you would play like a kind of like a C5 under it. So like if you were playing today's Pismon, what you would play under that basically would be like. For something that the root really is a half flat in the third. Okay, does that make sense? Does the structure of the maqam make sense to everyone? Does anybody want any further explanation on how one is to build this or ornament this, or any elements of the tuning, or how one would maybe transition from this maqam to another maqam? Any aspects of the technical before we move on to our pismon of the day?
I missed your definition of jins.
Oh, yes. So jins, singular, and then ajnaz, plural, are the, I would call them they're like tetrachords or pentachords of the maqam. And so they're these scale fragments. So when people talk about maqamat being Middle Eastern scales, Arabic or Turkish scales, I think in a way that's incorrect, and that these ajnas are the scales, and the maqamat are these scales put together in a certain way that have an emotional resonance and certain typical phrases and typical ways of ornamenting, if that makes sense. Yeah. So like Sigah, you know, the jins Sigah is, that's jins Sigah. Jins Hijaz, there are the three note phrases that make up the maqamat. And with that, you can make other maqamat. And it's what really, to me, it's what makes this music really exciting to learn and to teach, because once you know these elements, you can unlock other maqamat, older maqamat that have gone out of style, you know, different regional maqamat. If you understand this element, I think is very important. Yeah. Any other questions?
It's not like a question as such, but would we be able, before jumping straight into the pismon, would we be able to just spend a little more time just playing the scale? I know my ear isn't particularly the upper portion.
Absolutely.
I've gone through a few different ajnas for the upper portion. I feel like I haven't quite got my ear in the upper.
Would you like to play a little and play with me? Would that help you?
I mean, not off mute, I wouldn't. But
no. But
that would be ideal. Yeah, if we can just play around a bit more.
Definitely.
And like, I don't know, I guess just say when you're switching.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'll do, and I'll do it with minimal ornamentation. Let's take a few minutes and go through these scales. Let's start with the let's see. let's start with Sigah on E half flat with the Rast, and then we'll descend with the Nahawand on G to the Sigah E half flat, and then let's do the Huzam variant as well. I would say you want to ground yourself with a C. Before playing any of these maqamat, you want to ground yourself with a C. Are you feeling the way that builds and descends with the Sigah and the Rast and then the Nahawan? So okay, let's go on to Huzam. Something I want to note, when you see Hijaz will be notated in a certain way and played a different way. We'll talk about that when we do Hijaz. I think Hijaz is next week. Hijaz is notated like this and played like this. The distance between these two notes is pushed together. It's just it's a thing that they're not really, they're not like the same sort of quarter tones that are typically notated. They're not standardized in the same way, but it's something that I feel it's even getting lost in the younger generation of musicians. This is something that's been, I've heard from older hazanim and older musicians. They feel that the tuning of some of the maqamat that also have a more Western variant gets lost. We'll talk about that even with Ajam, which is just pretty much strictly major, but that too has a more classical Arabic tuning variant, which is getting lost. So these are all things to think about. Also, when you're playing Turkish music and when you're playing Persian music, listen to Turkish and Persian tuning. Listen to how they're tuning their microtones. I mean, those are not musics that I'm as much an expert in. It's not my not the tradition that I grew up with so much. So I can't really advise quite as much in how you would tune your microtones. But my best advice from playing gigs in those sort of music worlds is you would tune your microtone sharper for Turkish and a little bit flatter for Persian, with the Arabic being the mean, being basically what we're going over today. Okay, before we move on to the Pizmon, does anybody have any additional questions? Okay, I think then it's time to move on to the Pizmon. Very good one today. Okay, Ephraim, if you can, okay. There we go. Yahid el Dagul Mirbaba. So this is one of, I would say this is probably the most popular Pizmon in this maqam. Well, maybe Bar Yochai. Bar Yochai is really popular. But this is really popular. This is one of the most used. So there are a lot of applications for this for tefillah. So I'm really glad that this is the one that is the Pizmon of the week. It's also a very good application of the maqam. You'll see that it's a very straightforward use of the maqam, and you'll see that, yeah, it's very clearly Sigah. ربا يحيد التاغ المربابا يباري حلي غبر ربا شير إذ نفشي أهبا بأهبا وبرب حبا بأهبا وبرب حبا شديه يبارخ أوتو يشمر بو بستو شديه يبارخ أوتو يشمر بو بستو كل عام يقسم لكرتو بيومروا له باروخ هبا بيومروا له باروخ هبا اليون يرمم مزلو بهويه لعزرلو اليون يرمم مزلو بهويه لعزرلو والثروة بيفتح له يسكي ليحرق تبا يا يبارك كل حلو جنود حيم يوصف له يا يبارك كل حلو جنود حيم يوصف له بيسم شالوم بيقولوا يهلو حم الناس جبان يهلو حم الناس جبان Okay, so that's the Pismon of the week. We'll go through it a little bit more in depth in a second, but I want to just talk about a little bit what this is. So this is a Pismon, Yahid el-Dagul, that is from the 19th century. And it is a Pismon. It's very interesting. Most of the Pismonim that we talk about and that we're going to go through have a very clear they're very clear contrafacta. We know the Arabic song that they're taking the melody from. But in this case, we're actually not exactly certain what the song is, even though the manuscripts say that it comes from a song called Ya Naslun Ya Helo Ya Koto. We don't know what that song is, and that may actually even be a mistake. But this was written in the 19th century by Hacham Yeshaya Sultan Rabia, who was one of the many Hachamim of Halab, of Aleppo, where many of these Pismonim, most of these Pismonim were written. And indeed, this was written for, as many of these Pismonim were written, this was written for someone in particular. So you can see the name, there's an acrostic that says Yeshaya in the text. So this is one of the many Pismonim that are in the Syrian tradition that just reflect maybe a tribute to a certain person, maybe a wedding, maybe a bar mitzvah, maybe some other life cycle event. But this is a very, very popular Pismon, and it's very useful for Hazanut. So let me demonstrate how that would be done before we break down a little bit of the melody. So you could use it in the context of let's see, what does it say in the survey of what it would be used for? The survey says I would use this personally, probably for Bifi Yesharim, from personal experience. Yeah, that's what the survey says. It's Bifi Yesharim. Okay, good. So I just don't want to I want to make sure that there are no Syrians online who are not going to give me any trouble for what I'm using this for. So you would do Bifi Yesharim Tidroma Mufsif Sadikim تتبارك وبالشون حسيدم تتكلم خداش وفكر في قيدوشين بتهلل, something like that. And there are many other settings for that you could use that. You could do this. You could do this for many other parts of the tefillah. But let's go back to the pizmon. Before I break it down, does anybody have any questions about this?
So the A's in this are A flats, not quarter tones, just normal A flats.
No, so this is basically huzam, I would say.
Okay.
This is categorized in the tradition as being proper Sigah for whatever reason. I actually have to check if there is a separate huzam category. That would be worth checking. But this is huzam because the first line is, so that's jin Sigah, but then the second half is hejaz. So the only thing I would say about that is just the tuning on that A flat is just going to be a little bit like that, you know? So it's huzam. It's, to answer your question, it is A flat and it is huzam. Yeah. Okay. So let's go through this a little bit. Let's go through the first stanza a little bit slower. Everyone good with that? Anybody have any other questions before we break this down? It's actually pretty simple, despite the fact that this is a Sigah. It's actually a fairly simple song. Someone asks, so when we go to the second triad, are we still in Sigah? We are in Sigah. This song is a pizmon in Sigah, but that it's not jin Sigah anymore. So that particular set of notes is not Sigah, but the song itself is still categorized as Sigah, or more precisely huzam, which is a variety of Sigah. If it was strictly Sigah, it would go up to an A natural, and then it would have a jins rast up there, like that. But it's huzam. But yeah, that's what's going on there. Okay, Yahid al-Dagul from the beginning. I'll play it a couple times slowly, just the oud, and then I'll do the first stanza twice slowly, and then I think I'll just go through it once, and then I'll see if anyone has any questions. يحيد الدغول مربابا يبارك لغبرة ربا يحيد الدغول يبارك لغبرة ربا شرت نفسي أهبا بأهبا وبروب حبا بأهبا وبروب حبا. يحيد الدغول مير بابا يبارك لي غبرة ربا يحيد الدغول مير بابا يبارك لي غبرة ربا أشير بنفسي أهبا بأهبا وبروب حبا بأهبا. Before I go on to the rest of the song and go through the rest of the stanzas once again, does anybody have any questions about the melody or the structure or anything about it?
I do have a question. My Hebrew is still very rudimentary, so I'm trying to follow along. Are you repeating sections?
Yes, I am.
Cool. That's what I thought. Which one?
Yes, exactly. That's why I mentioned structure, because I thought maybe some folks might have some questions about that. There are different ways to sing this song, so this is just the way I learned it. So I sing the first line. I should also mention that I'm pronouncing things according to the Syrian tradition, which does not distinguish between bet and vet, but does distinguish between gimel and rimel, and between certain other letters that maybe other traditions don't. So the first line, Ya Hayd el Daghul Mirbaba Yibarech Le Ghabra Rabba. That repeats, Ya Hayd el Daghul Mirbaba Yibarech Le Ghabra Rabba. Then next line, Asher Nafishi Ahiba Be'a Aba Umru Hiba. Be'ahaba repeats. Be'ahaba Umru Hiba. So that's the way it works, is basically everything repeats except for the third bit.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Good, I'm glad. Any other questions from anyone before we move on and sing the rest of the song? Simone. I think we're going to sing the rest of this Pismon. And just once again, I really appreciate everyone joining. This is a wonderful thing for me to be able to share this tradition of the Maqam of the week. It's very important. One thing that I want to share before I move on and sing the rest of this Pismon with you all is why the Maqam, I forgot to mention why the Maqam this week is indeed Sigah. So Sigah is, there are a few reasons why the Maqam is Sigah. So Sigah, as I mentioned, means third in Persian, in Farsi. So this is the third perasha in the book of Midbar. And so when you're talking about parashiot and their correlation with the maqamat, numbers have something to do with it. So typically, the first parasha of a book will be done in maqam rast. So rast being the fundamental maqam, meaning head, the head of the maqamat system. So typically that will be the case. And so this week's parasha, Parashat Beha'alotecha, is the third. It's both the third parasha in the book, but also it has some special correlations with the actual structure of the maqam. So the parasha talks about the priestly ceremonies, the menorah, the building of the Mishkan, and these are all of the physical accompaniments that deal with the Torah. And this maqam, in our tradition, in the Sephardic tradition, is the maqam of the chanting of the Torah. So there's, in the Syrian tradition, a notion that this parasha, which talks about the building of the Mishkan, should be chanted in the maqam that is thought of as having something substantially to do with the Torah. So one of the things that I really love about this tradition, and one of the things that I hope for people to gain out of it, is it really is one of the ways in which the Sephardic tradition aims to take something which is really deeply rooted in the art cultures of the Middle East and weave it into a tradition of teaching Torah and of Yahadut. Okay, so let's continue the Pismon. Before that, let me check the chat, see if anyone has any questions that they didn't ask. Okay. Someone says, okay, the Sigah questions, Hijaz questions, understand it this way. This is a song that is in, it is a Pismon, it's in Maqam Sigah, more precisely, it's in Maqam Huzam. The first line is in, it's Jins Sigah, and the second is Jins Hijaz that then resolves down to Jins Sigah, which makes it Huzam. If you have any more specific questions, you can email me. You can, I'm around. I think we're all around a lot these days. شداي حوي بريخ أدو بيشمر بو بيسيطو شداي حوي بريخ أدو بيشمر بو بيسيطو كل عام מיוסים לקראתו ויאמרו לו ברוך הבא ויאמרו לו ברוך הבא. עליון ירום ממזלו והוא יהיה לעזרו. עליון ירום ממזלו והוא יהיה לעזרו. ساعته بيفتح له يسكي لأحرق توبة يسكي لأحرق توبة. كل حلو شرود حيم يوصف له يا يبارك كل حلو شرود حيم يوصف له ويسم شلوم يغفو له يحيي له حمى نسجبا يحيي له حمى نسجبا. يحيد الداخل مربابا يبارك بغبر ربا. يحيد الداخل مربابا يبارك بغبر ربا. شرد نفسي أهبا بيابا وبروح حبا بآبا وبروح حبا. Before we end, any questions? Any final questions about maqamat, this particular maqam, this pizmon, anything really? Oh, thank you. I see that someone says they were able to sing along by the end. That's wonderful. That's the goal here. Is I want to be able to present this in a way that everyone can take a little bit of this tradition and bring it into their week and bring it into their Shabbat. So if there are any more questions or anything, if not, I want to wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom Borach.
Wait, actually, sorry, can I ask a question?
Of course, of
Can I
course.
jump in?
Yes, please.
So when you were saying before about when you're reading the Torah, you're going to be doing it, and you may have covered this last week when I wasn't in, but is that going to be on the particular maqam? Is that going to change the actual?
No, Torah is always Sigah. It's always Sigah.
But it is in Sigah. Okay, that's what you were saying. You were saying it's all okay. Great, cool, thank you.
Right. So if you understand the elements that we learned today, you can read the Torah accurately. I want to emphasize that because there has been a lot. I would say I'm not, and I don't buy this concept of Yeridat HaDorot that goes around in a lot of Jewish circles, but it's true when it comes to, really, it's actually true when it comes to the chanting of the Torah in Sephardic circles, because this idea of having a maqam that's based on a microtonal third is absolutely impossible for people who aren't taught it formally or really in a way where it's drilled into their heads musically, where they get. And then there's also something that you may have noticed if you've spent time in Sephardic circles. There's this transposition that happens at the end of the Torah reading that should not happen, where it transposes to Bayat Shuri. This is really one of my pet peeves. So the Torah reading, whatever. Let me open up to a Torah reading right now. Okay.
The end of the first. Well, anyway, sorry.
Here.
I know this one. This is my parsha.
So let's see. We're gonna open up to this week's perasha. Let's look at just the first pasuk. Vaydaber Adonai Moshe lemor daber Aaron ve'amarta elav ve'anotecha et hanerot el mul bnei menorah. Yeah, if this was the end of the Aliyah, today most people would do this. They would do Ya'iru Shivat Hanerot, and
Yes.
ended on a D, which changes the maqam and makes it bayat shuri. And everything that you did, even if you're singing the Sigah right up until that point, is for naught because the maqam has been just transposed.
So how are you supposed to end it?
You're supposed to end it like, so if I was to do the same pasuk, let's say,
Okay.
On you end it on Sigah. Yeah, some people. I learned it going up, and then some people would just not go up. They wouldn't do what I do. Some people would just do which is probably more authentic because that's just Sigah. It doesn't do any of those modulations. But the important thing for Torah is to not do that bayat shuri. That was something that my teachers instilled into me, and I believe that it really is important because there's real importance in the fact that Sigah is associated with Torah, because in the Sephardic tradition, the Hazanut has actual meaning. You know, it's not just like, these aren't just songs that people like that they put to the Hazanut. In some cases that was the case, and they did that and they mentioned it. Like if you look in the Pizmonim book, they'll say, yeah, this is an Kaltum song, this is a Farid al-Atrash song, but then they find a way to make the maqam have some sort of significance and tie it into, so there's really like this beautiful, I don't know, it's a beautiful system, and we should respect it.
Cool, thanks.
Any other questions before we say Shabbat Shalom Borach to everyone?
Where do you find these pages of Pizmonim?
You should buy this book called The Red Book, which has all of them. It's called Shiru Shvacha Halel V'Zimra, and it's a book that is like, I don't know, it's like 600 or 700 pages of Pizmonim, and it has every Pizmon for everything that you might need. But the truth is they're all online. If you go on pizmonim.org, they're all there and they have recordings. But
can you hold it up one more time? I want to take a screenshot.
I have a lot of nostalgia for the book. You'll find this in every Syrian or Lebanese or Egyptian Jewish household. They call it the Red Book. And if you listen to the recordings on the website, they'll say, page 481 in the Red Book. Turn to this week's Pizmon, Yahid El Darul. And it's really like that. So that you really can't get better than the Red Book. And in some cases, there'll be like 10 pages that are all 280 because they needed to add more Pizmonim in a certain section for a Maqam, and they didn't want to do a real new printing, so they just kept adding them to each section. So this is really such a treasure from the community. I highly recommend anyone who is interested in the learning that we're doing here, who wants to get something that is materially connected to that world, to get this book. You know, I mean, my grandfather, my Jiddo's bar mitzvah Pizmon is in this book. You know, anyone who is connected to the world of Syrian or Egyptian or Lebanese Jewry will have some sort of relative that is memorialized in this book. It's a wonderful thing.
That's so
But yeah,
cool.
they put out a survey every week, which is what we're using, the Pizmonim survey, the Hazanut survey, where they summarize what are the applications for the Maqam of the week and what are the Pizmonim of the week, basically. So it's a foundation, the Pizmonim website and the people who publish these books.
I have a quick question. So definitely I'm actively working on my Hebrew right now, but for transliteration sources, is there a place that we can go?
I know that Ephraim said that we can have transliterations made for anyone who needs, particularly. Just let us know. Maybe Ephraim, you'd like to say something?
So just send an email to info@SHIN-DC.org and request transliteration. And if there's at least one person requesting it, then we'll take care of it. you might not necessarily get it before the class, but at the very least, you'll get it afterwards, and you can pair that up with the recording as need be. And so that we can help with that in that way.
Awesome, thank you.
I also should recommend, maybe Ephraim, I'm forgetting the name, but maybe Ephraim remembers, there's a really very excellent set of Syrian transliterated Sidurim. The name escapes me, but it's really...
The Ort Sephardic calls Sasson.
Is that the one, is it transliterated?
Oh, sorry.
No. Orot is very good, but it's not transliterated.
It's not transliterated.
No, it's not. Sorry, I missed it.
No, there is. If you send one of us an email, I have a copy of this particular Sidur. I can look in my shelves and I can get you the information. It has many Pismonim actually in it because it's published in Brooklyn in the Syrian community. But it's very well done, and I like their transliteration scheme. It's very accessible.
All right. So thank you for joining us. The Maqam of the Week webinar series with Asher Shasho-Levy is a weekly class that occurs every Friday through August 28th. So please join us via the same Zoom information each week. The next class is on Friday, June 19th, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Pacific Time in the US and Canada. You can also email any questions to Asher between classes at ashershasholevy@SHIN-DC.org, which is the same as his Instagram. So please also be sure to follow him on there. Make sure that you are receiving the emails from us to access class recordings and materials. You should already have 2 emails from info@SHIN-DC.org. And for anyone who would like to donate, please contact us also at info@SHIN-DC.org, and we'll tell you how you can do that. So, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Umeborach. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom Borach. Thank you all for
Shalom.
joining. I hope you all join us next week, and please don't hesitate to reach out for questions to me or Ephraim, or if you're feeling generous to donate to either of us and to the organization. And I hope that everyone joins us next week, because next week is going to be, I believe it's Maqam Hijaz, which is one of my favorites. Very, very popular, applicable Maqam. So Shabbat Shalom Borach, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thanks very much.
My pleasure. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
This was really wonderful.
Shabbat shalom,
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
يحيد التغول مير بابا